Accident victims like you deserve better. A husband and wife were rear-ended, and insurance offered them $10,000. We litigated the case and got them $375,000. Qualified expert attorneys can get you more. Call Zirkin and Schmerling today.
Good evening, Baltimore City. This is City Voters Live podcast, and I'm your host, Desmond Stenney, coming to you live this Wednesday, June 26th, for a wonderful show. We are right in the heat of the 2024 presidential election cycle. Baltimore City recently had its mayoral primary back in May, on May 14th. We had some very spirited contests for mayor, but what was striking to me was the actual turnout numbers that we had in the city, which really paints a picture to me that there's a lot of voter apathy in Baltimore City. We look at the numbers of people that actually turned out to vote for mayor, and we're just going to share some numbers with you right off the bat here. You have 294,000 plus registered Democrats, of which 92,462 showed up to vote. It's about a 31.4% turnout. When I look at these numbers and I think about it and I ask folks if they voted or if they participated or not, I tend to hear some consistent feedback on that. And when I ask some of the young folks, the thing I hear a lot is, my vote doesn't count, and my vote doesn't matter. System's rigged, things of that nature. Now, when you hear things once or twice, you might be able to write it off. But when you continue to hear it and consistently hear it, you start to wonder what's feeding that narrative. Where's it coming from? And it really strikes a chord with me, because I think voting is one of those basic rights that we've fought for, and many people struggled, many people died, for this right. And we're seeing in Baltimore City, at least, we're seeing the participation levels are very low. This is the first primary that we've had for mayor that there wasn't a really contested presidential race, and it really showed how people feel about local politics. When we look at those numbers a little deeper, we'll look at the number of total registered Democrats is around 299,475. The Democratic nominee for mayor in Baltimore City, May 14th, ended up with 48,806 votes. That's about 16% of 16.5% of total registered Democrats in the city. And when you take that a step further and look at the total number of voters that we have in the city, we have 390,560 registered voters. That 48,000 represents about 12.5% of total registered voters in Baltimore City. And that's who will be leading, the person that will be leading for all practical purposes. Baltimore City is heavily Democratic. There won't be any real challenge in the general election. When you start to peel back at the numbers, and you see that 12.5% of registered voters are deciding who's going to run the city for the next 4 years, or at least the next 4 years, it gets to be a little concerning. And that's why I particularly pay attention to other forms of citizens being involved and being engaged in the political process. And one of those methods is a more direct uh, access to impacting and affecting, legislation, the charter, and things of that nature, is the charter amendments. And I particularly enjoyed the, citizen petition charter amendments, because those tend to be uh, a little bit more democratic, at least in Baltimore City, than what we see in the actual election. When we look at the charter amendments that are going to be on the that could possibly end up on the ballot here in November, we'll see that 23,000 people have signed one of the petitions. And I've participated in those in signature gathering for petitions previously, and I can tell you it's not a 31% hit rate. If there was a 31% hit rate, then we would never see any petitions reaching the ballot. You're probably going to get 23,000 signatures. You probably talk to about 35,000 people, and that's about a 65% participation rate. I think one of the reasons that is the case with petitions is because you can clearly see what you're getting. When you think about a petition, you're actually looking at the end result, the product, which you're actually going to receive, and you can sign up for it or you can choose not to sign up for it. And we see a lot more people, at least a lot higher percentage of people, when you talk to them about the petitions, get involved and get engaged, and they either sign it or they don't. But it's a lot higher than what we've seen in recent history, showing up to the polls. And I think the ballot measures are a great way for citizens to kind of take control of the some part of the legislative process. And depending on the actual legislation that's being proposed, I can go either way, whether or not I agree with it or not agree with it. But it's the actual process of the charter amendments, and especially the citizen-led charter amendments, that I particularly am fond of, and is quite a bit more direct control for the citizens. Well, today, seeing as how in Baltimore City we don't have much of a general election, it's pretty much party politics at that point. And as you can see, Democrats heavily outweigh any other party in Baltimore City. So for all practical purposes, our primary is our election. The only thing that, from a local standpoint, of course, we've got, we'll be choosing a new president, and on the national and state level stage, we'll have some choices to make and some races to watch. But from a local perspective, it's really all about what ballot measures make it on to the general election ballot this year. And there's been two that have been talked about quite a bit recently, and a lot of commentary has been, there's been a lot of commentary on the two, the potential ballot measures. One having to do with property tax, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about that one. I haven't studied it and read it quite as much as I have the second one that we'll talk about today, which is the potentially restructuring the Board of Estimates, which is something that I've been passionate about for a very long time, and have even drawn up my own proposals. The one that's being proposed is not the one that I thought of, but it is a restructuring and a rebalancing of the power structure in Baltimore City from the spending board perspective. So I'm very excited today to have our guest join us today, Comptroller Bill Henry. the indelible, lifelong politician from Baltimore. Bill, thank you for joining us today and accepting our invitation to come on the City Voters Live podcast.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Although I'm not quite sure that I can lay claim to being a lifelong politician. There was a period in there where I was just a kid and I was having fun. But yeah, I'm not ashamed to call myself a lifelong Baltimorean who has spent as much of my time as I can just trying to help make Baltimore better.
And to that you have, and I don't think that you're the first Henry to do so. No. So, tell us a little bit about your history in Baltimore, Bill. Let the voters who don't know get to hear all about the Henry family.
I used to joke in opportunities like this that I was born in a log row house, but that got less funny as the years went by. I'm like I said, I'm from Baltimore. I've grown up here, raised my family here. I'm now ecstatic when my kids come back to visit. I was, I'm trying to think of the most succinct way to put this. My parents were the most influential people in my life. It's not uncommon. My mom is very much a make the world a better place kind of person. And my dad was very much a make the world a better place, but focus on the part of the world right there around you, where you and your people are. He was someone who had worked in the civil rights movement when he was a young man back in the 60s, but specifically a lot of his friends, they reframed and shifted into politics, looking to make the same sort of social change, but instead of being outside agitators, wanted to be inside agitators. And he ran for office for state legislature when he was like 25, 26. And he lost to this carpetbagger from the Eastern Shore named Paul Sarbanes. But what he took away from that was, while he hadn't enjoyed being a candidate, he loved elections and campaigning. And so he spent most of his adult life running campaigns for other people. And so I grew up in a household where state senators and delegates and city council people were, coming and going. And these were the people my dad hung out with. And I grew up as a kid seeing those roles as jobs. They are things people can do, just like being a doctor or a mailman. These are ways that you can participate, and I saw them as these are opportunities for people who want to help in a lot of different ways, because the legislature, the city council, the General Assembly, they focus, as it were, on so many different issues. If what really gets your blood pumping is labor issues or housing or education, you can go be an advocate and you can volunteer or work full time in that kind of issue advocacy. But if you care about all of them and want to find a way to try to make Baltimore better in all the different ways that it needs to be, you find yourself drawn to government.
And I tell you that's a beautiful story that I've never heard, and it is completely important that children grow up in environments where their parents are hyper engaged in I hate to say local politics, but local civic duty is probably a better way to put that. And as you stated, as you become familiar with the fact that those are jobs and those jobs do impact the lives of the people in and around you, and near and far. It really, I think, it made a mark on you, right? And I can tell you that I do everything that I can to make sure that my children see me actively civically engaged, and and that's a lot about what this show is all about, and having my children see their parents involved. And
I've probably gone too far in that direction.
I wouldn't say that. I tell you that the city is better for the direction that you have chosen. And today we'll talk about a couple of your passions. So today we're talking about the charter amendments. There's two in particular that I think that you have positions on. One is I think it's the property tax, and this is one I'm going to be asking you to kind of school me on, as you heard it in my lead up. The charter amendment process is something that I am passionate about. Now, the actual legislation that's being presented in the charter amendment, or whatever the ask is in the charter amendment, it can be for or against, but the process itself is one that I'm passionate about. So I'm here to be educated as much as we can. So if you want to maybe dive into this property tax proposal, I think everybody on its face sees the property taxes that we pay in Baltimore City. We feel like it's high, comparatively to other jurisdictions around us. Some of us might feel it's justified, some of us might feel it's not. Whether or not we do, it is what it is, and it's what keeps the lifeblood of the city. So when we have a proposal like this that's going to do drastic things, I'm interested to hear where you, as the comptroller of the city and kind of the purse strings of the city, what are your thoughts on this proposal? One, take us through the proposal and give us your thoughts.
Okay, well, I may want to come back later on and have a separate conversation about the number of purse strings that I do not control for city government. But both on some level, the good and the bad of the Renew proposal is that it is on the surface very simple. It's not just that a lot of people feel like their taxes are high. Our taxes are high. We have a local tax rate that is almost twice what it is for the subdivisions around us, the other counties in Maryland, and it would be its own conversation to discuss in detail how we got here. It would include basically a lot of sins of the past. People who are dead made mistakes, and there's only so much that we can do about that now. The question is, how do we do what we do about it now? And that's really what is before us. It is no surprise to really anyone that this petition would make its way onto the ballot, because if you stand in front of somebody with a clipboard and you say, would you like your property taxes to be half what they are now? Very few people are going to, ask questions about, well, what's involved in that? Most people are just going to be excited to hear that that this is a way of getting Baltimore City to the point where they can pay less in taxes. But the reality is, what this proposal calls for a 46% property tax reduction over just 7 years.
That's aggressive.
And so we would go from about $2.25 right now down to $1.20 by, I think, 2031. And while that sounds great from the perspective of someone who pays thousands of dollars a year in property taxes and would enjoy keeping that money and spending it on other things, And I include myself in that. I mean, I pay thousands of dollars in property tax as any homeowner in Baltimore does. The problem is that, and the best example I can give, or the best metaphor, my wife actually pressed this on me. I could afford to lose some weight, like many Americans, I could afford to lose some weight. She was very clear to me, she agrees. Okay. But she was also very clear that she didn't want me to do one of these fad diets, or, take some, weird pill or something like that and try to drop, 60 or 70 or 80 pounds in a couple weeks or a couple months.
There's a health to it.
Yeah, and if you talk to any physician, they'll tell you if you need to lose some weight, it's best to lose a pound or two. If you can lose a pound or two a month and just keep it going and just keep dropping, that's really the safer way to do it. And surprisingly, that turns out to be an effective economic metaphor also, because when you've got a proposal like Renew, where you're trying to reduce the property tax rate from 225 to 120 in just 7 years, what you're really talking about is reducing the revenue that the city gains from property taxes by literally hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
And the proponents of Renew are confident, and they've got economists that will back them up on this. They're confident that as the tax rate comes down, people will invest more in buying property in Baltimore. And as they buy more of the property, the price, the value of the land will go up. And as the value of the property goes up, even though the tax rate is coming down, the taxes collected on the property will also go back up. And so they're convinced that we will maintain a constant collection rate and eventually even be collecting more. That is their assertion. And the economists who support this will say this makes sense. It reminds me of, I think, well, I'm not sure if it's the only economist joke I know, but the first economist joke I learned was a physicist, an engineer, and an economist are trapped on a desert island when a crate of canned food washes up on shore. And the physicist says, well, let's go up onto the highest place we can find and throw the cans down and use the kinetic energy to pop them open. We can get at the food inside. And the engineer says, no. Let's find the sharpest rocks we can and use vines and wrap around and squeeze them and try to pop them open that way. And the economist says, no. You're both making this way too complicated. First, assume we have a can opener. And that's kind of the problem with basing city services for hundreds of thousands of people on an economic principle. Yes, I'm not denying that the principle is true. I'm just saying that the principle doesn't necessarily actually happen in real life at the speed you would like it to happen on paper.
Right, the timing.
Yeah,
right. And it sounds to me, what they're banking on is the assessed values of properties going up.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's what it feels like to me.
Oh yeah.
And at which case, to me as a citizen, I mean, what do I benefit? Do I want to pay 2.2% of this assessed rate or 1.1% of a much higher assessed rate? Right. But at the end of the day, the check I'm writing, right, becomes very, very similar. All right. So I was hoping to hear that this plan, and like I said, I was very candid in my opening that I haven't read this bill. I haven't read this amendment. Like I said, I love charter amendments, but I also am going to look at what's inside the box, right? And to me, I'm not an economist. I'm a finance guy, right? That's my trade. And as you're telling me, hey, it's not. I don't care about the rate. What I care about is the dollar amount, right? And if you're telling me you're just going to raise my assessed value so that the money I'm paying is about the same anyway, that doesn't really get me excited. And I don't know what it would do for others. Now, if this plan talked about somehow collecting revenue on the 33% of the land in Baltimore City that we currently aren't collecting taxes on because of nonprofit status or whatever other exemptions there are.
Yeah, that's not part of this. That's its own thing that we have to work on separately.
With the pilots, I think we were talking to Councilwoman Ramos about that previously in an episode. But those are the types of answers that I want to hear. Is how are we? If you're going to reduce the rate, you got to increase the revenue. And I don't think that just playing on assessed values is going to do it. Perhaps you can increase revenue by taking care of the vacants and getting those back online as properties that will be collecting. Perhaps we could take,
that and they would, and the people who are pushing for Renew Baltimore will say that will be part of this. That one of the things about about land value increasing is it's less likely that land would sit around anywhere being vacant if it was worth more. And if the cost, or I guess the value of a house in all the city neighborhoods goes up, one of the issues we have right now is that a lot of our vacants are vacants because it is just literally not possible to rehab a house or build a new house there for less than what houses are worth there. And so the proponents of Renew will say, if you make all houses worth more by raising the value of land, you will get more people interested in developing now vacant property. But I would say if all houses cost more and are worth more, that's also going to mean that everybody who owns a house is going to have to eventually be paying more in taxes for it. But more to the point, all the people who don't own houses are going to continue to be paying more and more in rent because their landlords are going to be paying increased taxes as the value of the rentals goes up.
And they're going to pass that along. There's no question. They're not going to eat that, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting proposal, and I'm going to spend some time digging into it, quite a bit more. This won't be the last time that we're talking about it here on City Voters Live podcast. And the nuts and bolts are important. The hows are how they're going to do it is important. Like you said, it's easy. It's an easy sell on its face, but the details, absolutely matters. And let's shift the gears a little bit. And we know how charter amendments work in the city. With 23,000 signatures, in all likelihood, this is likely going to be on the ballot.
Yeah.
What takes place? What happens if this gets on the ballot and it does what most ballot measures do?
So for what it's worth, and this kind of goes back to one of the philosophical points you raised at the beginning. I also enjoy talking about charter amendments and looking at ways that we can improve the current structure. But one of the downsides of the petition version of charter amendments versus introducing a charter amendment through the city council, which is the other way they get on the ballot, is that and I wrote down, you described this, a petition is the end result. And so it's very easy to talk to somebody about the end result. But the problem with that is there is no effective, there's no tweaking of it. There's no, well, this is kind of good, but if only could do this differently, which is available through the legislative process. But when you're talking about a petition, somebody else had their own process where they came up with the idea. And now that petition is in front of you, you sign it or you don't sign it. And if enough people signs it, you vote for it or you don't vote for it. There's no nuance. There's no discussion. It's just a yes or no. And that's where I feel the legislative version is better in terms of letting more people have more input into the actual work content that's going to end up going before the voters.
That is absolutely fair, and I appreciate you earmarking that and bringing that up, because that's an important factor to the process that I hadn't completely thought about. It was the entire vetting process that bills go through in the legislative process. It goes through a committee, then it goes to the floor, then it goes to the mayor, and either becomes fully vetted or back down to the council. And that is an important process, and I appreciate you making note of that and sharing that with the folks that'll be viewing this. It is a downside. It is of concern, because you really have one side of the coin determining what that end product is. There is, like you said, there's no massaging, there's no tweaking, there's no devil's advocate, type of situation that occurs with these measures. It's something we got to be extremely careful about. Now,
and here is, I'm sorry, I've had two little nags over my screen now for this. I'm going to have to go in a minute, and I wanted to ask if you wanted to try to do the BOE super quick, or if I should come back and do that on a later episode.
I tell you what, I've got a board meeting this afternoon as well, and I'll take that extra time to prepare for that. Okay. I don't think we can do the BOE one quick, because that is my passion, right? Yeah. So I tell you what, we can cut this one here and let the viewers and the voters chew on this Renew Baltimore proposal. I'll go take a look at that. Maybe we'll recap that a little bit once I have a better understanding of the economics behind it, and we'll pick another time to get back together, and we'll go through the potential BOE the potential BOE restructuring charter amendment that we may be seeing. Thank you so much.
As I said publicly a week or two ago, the restructuring of the Board of Estimates is a conversation that has gone on, I guess off and on, for most of the time I've been in City Hall. So I'm looking forward to talking about that at length, and I'm happy to come back.
Absolutely. I'll get with your people, and we'll get another day on the schedule, and I look forward to seeing you then. Good luck with everything you got going on this evening.
All right, you too. Have a good one.
Thank you. Well, that's Comptroller Bill Henry. That was a very engaging conversation for me. Had an opportunity to sit down with the comptroller and discuss much of anything political related. There's mostly pleasantries and things of that nature, but he gave us some things to really think about. The ballot measures, as as a citizen and as an active engaged citizen for politics. You know how I feel about the charter amendments, but he brought up a very good point about how the legislation that is and will be the end result, should ballot measures succeed, don't get a solid vetting process, and that's something that we all need to think about. Well, I certainly hope that everyone learned a little bit more about the Renew Baltimore proposal. We'll take the time to dig through the pages of it. it's going to be on. It looks like it's going to be on the ballot with 23,000 signatures. I don't see how it couldn't, and we'll see how it shapes up. But we'll continue to talk about it here on City Voters Live podcast. And thank you for joining today. And I look forward to episode 26 with Comptroller Bill Henry talking about the Board of Estimates restructuring. Thank you for joining. Have a good evening.